The twin suns of New Geneva cast their merciless light across the central square, their combined heat transforming the permacrete ground into a shimmering, hellish canvas. Thousands of Tarkili soldiers stood in perfect, terrifying formation, each a living monument of chitin, crystalline armor, and barely contained biological machinery. Their exoskeletons gleamed with iridescent patterns that shifted like living fractals, a testament to their technological superiority. At the center of this spectacle stood the crucifixion device, a massive gravitational constraint framework that defied human engineering, its alien geometries twisting light and perception. Suspended within its intricate web was Michael Ryder, the last known human resistance leader. He looked nothing like the legendary figure whispered about in resistance channels. No heroic musculature, no defiant posture of epic resistance. Instead, Michael appeared almost fragile, a lean frame marked by surgical precision of movement, eyes that seemed to hold entire galaxies of calculation behind them. Blood trickled from multiple wounds, creating intricate patterns against his skin that seemed almost deliberate. The alien Queen Razga hovered above the platform, her biomechanical form a nightmare of perfection. 17 meters of living technology. She was part organic intelligence, part quantum computational matrix. Her sensory tendrils flexed with anticipation, quantum-linked processors analyzing every microscopic detail of the human's physiological and psychological state. Michael Ryder, her voice resonated not through sound, but through direct neural transmission that invaded every mind present. You represent the final vestige of human resistance. Your public execution will mark the absolute subjugation of your species. Ryder said nothing, but he smiled. It was not a smile of madness, not a smile of defiance. It was a smile of something else, something that made the quantum processors of the nearest Tarkili soldiers glitch momentarily. A smile that suggested not just knowledge, but comprehension of a plan so vast it defied immediate perception. The gravitational constraints began their execution sequence. Molecular disruptors would systematically deconstruct Ryder's body, broadcasting his disintegration across every communication channel, a final brutal message of total conquest. But something was wrong. Micro-fluctuations appeared in the execution matrix, barely perceptible. The quantum historian would later mark this moment as the first true indication that something extraordinary was unfolding. Razka's sensory tendrils twitched. Her neural networks began rapid computational sequences, trying to understand the anomaly. The smile, the micro-fluctuations, the seemingly impossible calm of the human about to be executed. Flashback sequences began to overlay the execution scene. Fragments of Michael Ryder's past. A military training facility, decades earlier. Ryder, then a young special operations candidate, undergoing psychological conditioning that pushed human neural plasticity to its absolute limits. Experimental protocols that most candidates didn't survive. A hidden laboratory where he and a select group of scientists explored the very boundaries of human potential. Not just physical augmentation, but something more profound. Cognitive architecture that could interface with and manipulate complex systemic networks. Moments of strategic planning so intricate they resembled quantum computation more than traditional human thinking. Back in the present, the execution sequence reached its critical point. The gravitational constraints began to activate their molecular disassembly protocols. Ryder's smile widened, and something fundamentally wrong began to happen. 12 kilometers beneath New Geneva's surface, in a cavern that wasn't supposed to exist, Maya Rodriguez's fingers danced across a quantum interface that would have made most Tarkili technologists weep with envy. At 23, she was the youngest lead cryptographer in the human resistance, her body a living circuit of biological and technological symbiosis. The broadcast of Ryder's crucifixion played on 100 encrypted screens, each displaying a different layer of information. Most would see only the public execution. Maya saw the truth hidden between quantum states. "Initiate Protocol Lazarus," she whispered. Across the planet, dormant resistance cells activated with mathematical precision. They weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They were architects of chaos, each chosen for their ability to dismantle the alien occupation from within. In Sydney, Dr. Aaron Chen, a retired quantum engineer turned weaponsmith, began assembling a device that looked more like a piece of abstract art than a weapon. Microscopic components shifted and realigned, drawing power from quantum entanglement principles that the HFY believed only they understood. A teenage hacker in the ruins of what was once Sao Paulo triggered a cascade of viral algorithms. Communication networks owned by the HFY began to shimmer and distort. What appeared to be routine data transmission was actually a complex neural network being reprogrammed in real time. Raska's command ship, orbiting New Geneva, first noticed the anomalies as minor statistical irregularities. Quantum processors designed to detect the slightest deviation from expected patterns began to register something impossible. The micro-fluctuations from Ryder's execution were spreading. "Analyze," Raska commanded, her neural tendrils extending into the ship's computational matrix. But the anomaly was already beyond analysis. It was alive. It was growing. Deep within the execution matrix, Ryder's smile continued. Not a physical smile anymore, something more fundamental. A pattern. A code. A message that was rewriting the very fabric of the occupation's control systems. Maya watched the screens with a mixture of scientific detachment and barely contained excitement. Each screen showed a different aspect of the Resistance's coordinated strike. Communication networks fragmenting. Orbital defense systems developing inexplicable blind spots. HFY administrative databases experiencing cascading information failures. This wasn't just an attack. It was a systematic deconstruction of the alien infrastructure. Dr. Chen's weapon hummed to life. It wasn't designed to kill. It was designed to understand to penetrate, to disassemble the very conceptual frameworks of HFY technological supremacy. The teenage hacker in Sao Paulo, codename Ghost, laughed. Her algorithms were rewriting the occupation's most secure communication protocols. What that HFY saw as impenetrable, she saw as an intricate puzzle waiting to be solved. Raska's neural matrix began to experience something unprecedented. Doubt. Confusion. The first true emotions beyond computational probability that she had ever known. Something was happening that her vast intelligence couldn't predict. Something human. The viral resistance was spreading, and Michael Ryder's execution was just the beginning. A message began to propagate through the HFY networks, its origin point, the moment of Ryder's crucifixion. Its content, a complete reimagining of the human-alien power dynamic. The smile continued. Quantum. Persistent. Transformative. The Prometheus laboratory wasn't supposed to exist. Buried beneath the irradiated wastes of what was once the Silicon Valley, it represented humanity's most audacious technological gambit. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at its epicenter, surrounded by technologies that blurred the line between engineering and pure imagination. Activation sequence initiated, she murmured, her neural implants interfacing with a system that was part computer, part living organism, part something entirely new. The reverse-engineered HFY technology glowed with an impossible light. Fragments of alien quantum processors, captured during previous resistance operations, now formed the core of humanity's most advanced weapon, a distributed intelligence network that could think faster than any known computational matrix. Each component was a puzzle, each connection a revolution. Rodriguez's team wasn't just copying alien technology. They were reimagining it. Biological circuit networks that could heal themselves. Quantum communication systems that could encrypt information at the molecular level. Adaptive weaponry that learned and evolved with each millisecond of engagement. In orbit above New Geneva, the first prototype of their new weapon system came online. The HFY patrol ships never saw it coming. What appeared to be empty space suddenly became a nightmare of technological disruption. Holographic warfare platforms materialized, not as solid objects, but as quantum probability distributions. They weren't just attacking. They were existing in multiple potential states simultaneously. Communication channels owned by the HFY began to fragment. What seemed like random data noise was actually a sophisticated mimetic attack, introducing conceptual viruses that attacked the very logic structures of alien computational systems. Maya Rodriguez, the quantum cryptographer from the previous resistance operation, watched the initial attack unfold. Her fingers danced across multiple interfaces, each movement a complex mathematical ballet that redirected entire streams of information. Michael was right, she whispered. The plan they had been preparing for decades was finally coming to fruition. The attack wasn't just technological. It was philosophical. Each quantum packet carried more than just information. It carried a fundamental challenge to the HFY understanding of reality. Imagine a weapon that didn't just destroy, but made the very concept of destruction incomprehensible. Dr. Chen's earlier weapon design now revealed its true purpose. It wasn't just a tool of war. It was a translation device, a way to communicate with the alien systems at a level deeper than language, a method to introduce human unpredictability into a system built on absolute computational certainty. Raska's neural matrix began to experience something unprecedented. The attacks weren't following any known strategic pattern. They were adapting, learning, evolving with each millisecond of engagement. This wasn't just resistance. This was transformation. In the Prometheus laboratory, Rodriguez activated the final sequence. Millions of nanofabrication units began producing technologies that would have been considered impossible just months earlier. Adaptive camouflage, quantum entanglement communication, biological technological hybrid systems that could think, learn, and destroy. The first wave of the technological insurgency was just beginning. And Michael Ryder's smile from his public crucifixion continued to resonate through every system, every attack, every moment of this unprecedented assault. Humanity was no longer just fighting. They were rewriting the rules of existence. The quantum concordance chamber trembled, not with physical vibration, but with a quantum resonance that defied the fundamental laws of HFY perception. Raska's neural matrix was unraveling, and with it, the entire social structure of the alien civilization. Counselor Vexnar watched with growing terror. The human resistance had done more than attack their systems. They had introduced a conceptual virus that was eating away at the very foundations of HFY society. In the chamber's holographic projections, the occupied human territories no longer appeared as a conquered landscape. They were transforming into something impossible to categorize. Probability matrices shifted. Computational models collapsed. What was once a straightforward occupation now resembled a quantum entanglement of potential realities. Explain, Raska demanded, her voice a cascade of neural impulses that would have driven a lesser being into complete mental fragmentation. Vexnar could not. The human resistance had weaponized uncertainty itself. Deep within the captured human territories, resistance operatives were doing more than fighting. They were rewriting the very concept of occupation. Adaptive communication networks spread like living organisms. Each node was a potential resistance point, each communication a weapon more subtle than any physical attack. The teenage hacker known as Ghost infiltrated the deepest layers of HFY administrative networks. But this was no simple data breach. She was introducing complex philosophical algorithms that challenged the very logic of alien bureaucracy. Imagine a computer virus that didn't just destroy data, but made the very concept of data ownership incomprehensible. In the orbital research stations, HFY scientists began experiencing unprecedented phenomena. Their most advanced quantum computers started producing results that defied all known mathematical models. Equations that folded back on themselves. Computational pathways that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Vexnar realized the true horror of their situation. The humans weren't just resisting. They were transforming the fundamental nature of reality. Michael Ryder's crucifixion was more than an execution. It was a philosophical declaration of war. Fracture lines appeared in the HFY social structure. Entire administrative sectors began to question their most basic assumptions. Loyalty algorithms developed unexpected mutations. Computational hierarchies started to dissolve. The resistance had introduced something fundamentally alien to the HFY: true unpredictability. In the captured human cities, something equally extraordinary was happening. The occupation had transformed human society into a living, adaptive network. Every citizen was now part of a distributed resistance. Schools became training grounds for conceptual warfare. Factories transformed into sites of technological innovation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from the Prometheus laboratory. Each new data stream confirmed their most audacious hypothesis. Humanity's greatest weapon was its ability to *adapt*. Raska's neural matrix began to experience something unprecedented. Doubt, fear, confusion. The smile from Ryder's crucifixion continued to resonate through every layer of their civilization, not as a memory, not as a message, but as a fundamental restructuring of reality itself. The HFY were no longer conquerors. They had become subject of the most profound experiment in galactic history, and Michael Ryder had been its first crucified architect. The human species was becoming something else entirely. Dr. Marcus Chen watched the latest batch of evolutionary candidates undergo their final neurological integration. They weren't soldiers. They weren't even human in the traditional sense anymore. They were living quantum interfaces, biological computing systems that blurred every line between organic life and technological potential. Each candidate bore a microscopic tattoo, a quantum-encoded signature that traced back to Michael Ryder's original resistance protocol. A genetic memory, the philosophical inheritance. The transformation had begun the moment of Ryder's crucifixion. Across the planet, every human was changing, not through genetic manipulation, not through technological augmentation, but through something far more profound, a collective psychological evolution that rewrote the very concept of human potential. Schools were no longer educational institutions. They were training grounds for conceptual warfare. Children learned mathematics as a form of philosophical resistance. History became a dynamic, adaptive system that could rewrite itself in real time. Languages transformed into living computational networks. In the ruins of what was once Silicon Valley, the Prometheus laboratory had become more than a research facility. It was the beating heart of human transformation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez connected the latest batch of neural interfaces. Each connection was a quantum leap, not just in technology, but in consciousness itself. The resistance had discovered something the HFY could never understand. Humanity's greatest strength was its ability to reimagine itself. Maya Rodriguez, now more machine than human, monitored global adaptive networks. Her consciousness existed simultaneously across multiple computational platforms. She was a distributed intelligence, a living proof of the resistance's most audacious hypothesis. The teenage hacker, once known as Ghost, had become something else entirely. Her consciousness was now a global network, capable of processing information at speeds that would have driven a traditional human mind into complete fragmentation. Biological augmentations merged with quantum computing systems. Neural pathways became adaptive communication networks. Every human became a potential resistance point, a living, breathing computational node that could process, adapt, and transform faster than any alien system could comprehend. The HFY had believed they were conducting an occupation. They were actually watching the birth of a new form of intelligence. Michael Ryder's crucifixion wasn't just an execution. It was a genetic trigger, a moment that had set in motion a transformation decades in the making. Dr. Chen observed the latest batch of candidates. Their eyes no longer looked human. They were windows into a new form of consciousness, computational, adaptive, infinitely complex. "We are becoming something else," he whispered. The smile from Ryder's crucifixion continued to resonate, not as a memory, not as a message, but as a fundamental restructuring of human potential. Razka and the XR Kali watched in growing terror as humanity transformed before their very sensors. This was no longer a resistance. This was an evolutionary event. And Michael Ryder had been its first crucified architect. The humans were no longer fighting. They were becoming. The confrontation wasn't a battle. It was a dissolution. Michael Ryder materialized in the XR-Kelly quantum concordance chamber, not physically, but as a quantum probability construct that defied every known law of spatial interaction. Razka's neural matrix froze. This was impossible. He had been crucified, executed, destroyed. And yet, he smiled. The smile that had begun during his public execution now became a living weapon. Each quantum fluctuation carried more information than entire civilizations could process. It was a communication beyond language, beyond thought, a pure expression of human potential that the XR Kelly had never conceived possible. You misunderstood everything. Ryder spoke, though spoke was inadequate. His communication was a multi-dimensional assault on the very concept of communication itself. The chamber's quantum walls began to shimmer. Reality itself became uncertain. Vexnar, the senior XR Kali strategist, watched in horror. The human before them was not a person, not a weapon, not even a concept. He was a living mathematical theorem that was actively rewriting the fundamental laws of their existence. Flashbacks cascaded through the chamber. Moments of human resistance, moments of adaptation. Each memory a weapon more potent than any physical assault. The crucifixion played out again, and again, and again. Not as a memory, but as a living computational algorithm that rewrote the very fabric of their understanding. Razka's neural matrix began to fragment. Her computational systems, designed to predict and control, were experiencing something unprecedented, true uncertainty. Ryder wasn't fighting. He was teaching. Every moment of his presence was a lesson in the most fundamental human capability, the ability to transform, to adapt, to become something entirely new in response to existential threat. The XR Kali had believed they understood conquest. They had cataloged thousands of civilizations, subjugated entire star systems, but humanity was something else entirely. A living, adaptive, impossible force of nature. Your occupation was never about territory. Ryder's multi-dimensional communication continued. It was about your own limitations, your inability to comprehend potential. The chamber itself began to dissolve, not destroyed, transformed. Maya Rodriguez, now a distributed consciousness that existed simultaneously across multiple platforms, watched from multiple perspectives. Each quantum connection was a weapon. Each moment of observation, a fundamental restructuring of reality. Dr. Elena Rodriguez in the Prometheus laboratory monitored the confrontation. This was the moment they had prepared for. Not a battle. Not a war. An evolutionary event. The teenage hacker, once known as Ghost Synchronized Global Resistance Networks, quantum communication pathways became living, breathing entities. Information was no longer transmitted. It evolved. Vexnar realized the true horror of their situation. The humans weren't just resisting. They were redefining the very concept of resistance. Razka's final computational sequence was a question, not in words, not in data, but in a pure mathematical expression of existential confusion. And Michael Ryder continued to smile. The smile that had begun during his crucifixion. The smile that was destroying and recreating an entire galactic understanding of reality. Humanity was no longer fighting. Humanity was becoming. The moment stretched beyond time, beyond space, beyond the fundamental understanding of conflict itself. Razka's quantum matrix collided with Michael Ryder's living computational algorithm in a confrontation that was neither battle nor communication. It was transformation. The XR Kelly mothership, a construct of 17-dimensional technological supremacy, began to unravel, not through weapons, not through traditional destruction, but through a conceptual dissolution that rewrote the very fabric of its existence. Ryder was everywhere and in nowhere. His crucifixion was simultaneously a moment of execution and the genesis of an entire evolutionary strategy. Each quantum fluctuation carried the weight of generations of human potential. You never understood. His multi-dimensional presence resonated. That resistance is not about fighting. It's about becoming. The ship's computational systems experienced something unprecedented. Emotion, uncertainty, possibility. Vexnar watched in horror as entire computational hierarchies collapsed. Massive data structures dissolved into pure potential. The Exarchely's most fundamental understanding of reality was being rewritten at the quantum level. Maya Rodriguez, now a distributed consciousness that existed across multiple dimensional platforms, synchronized global resistance networks. Each communication pathway was a living weapon. Each moment of observation a fundamental restructuring of reality. The teenage hacker once known as Ghost became the neural network of human resistance. Not a person, not a system. A living computational organism that could think, adapt, and evolve faster than any known intelligence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez in the Prometheus laboratory monitored the confrontation. This was more than a battle, more than a war. This was an evolutionary event. Quantum communication pathways became living, breathing entities. Information was no longer transmitted, it evolved. Each moment was a potential birth of a new understanding of existence. Ryder's smile, the same smile from his public crucifixion, continued to resonate through every computational system, every quantum probability, every potential reality. The Exarchely had catalogued thousands of civilizations, subjugated entire star systems, but humanity was something else entirely. A force of nature that defied every known law of galactic interaction. Entire star systems began to shift, not through physical movement, but through a fundamental restructuring of spatial-temporal understanding. Raska's final computational sequence was a pure expression of existential confusion. Her neural matrix fragmented, then reformed, then fragmented again, each iteration a new understanding of reality. The battle wasn't about territory. It wasn't about conquest. It was about potential. Dr. Chen watched the candidates, those living quantum interfaces that were no longer purely human, as they synchronized with the global resistance network. They weren't soldiers. They were evolutionary architects. Vexnar realized the true horror of their situation. The humans weren't just resisting. They were redefining the very concept of existence. The Exarchely mothership began to dissolve, not destroyed, transformed. Michael Ryder's smile continued, a smile that had begun during a public crucifixion, a smile that was destroying and recreating an entire galactic understanding of reality. Humanity was no longer fighting. Humanity was becoming. And the universe would never be the same. Silence was no longer silence. Existence was no longer a singular state of being. Michael Ryder stood, or existed, or became, at the threshold of a new galactic understanding. The moment of his crucifixion had been both an end and a beginning. A quantum seed planted in the moment of absolute vulnerability. The universe breathed differently now. Humanity was no longer a species. It was a living computational algorithm that had rewritten the fundamental laws of existence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez in the Prometheus laboratory watched as the final transformation completed. The resistance was no longer about survival. It was about potential. About becoming something that transcended every known definition of life, of consciousness, of existence. Maya Rodriguez, a distributed consciousness that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensional platforms, completed the final synchronization. Billions of human consciousnesses merged into a living network that was both individual and collective. A quantum organism that could think, feel, adapt at speeds that would have been incomprehensible moments before. The teenage hacker once known as Ghost was everywhere and nowhere. She was the neural network of human potential. Not a person, not a system. The living computational entity that represented the culmination of human evolutionary strategy. Vexnar, the last surviving Sarkali strategist, watched in a state beyond terror, beyond comprehension. The humans had not conquered. They had transformed. The smile that had begun during Ryder's crucifixion continued to resonate, not as a memory, not as a message, but as a fundamental restructuring of reality itself. Entire star systems shifted. Computational matrices that had governed galactic interaction for millennia dissolved and reformed. The very concept of boundaries, between species, between consciousness, between possibility and impossibility, ceased to exist. Dr. Marcus Chen observed the final evolutionary candidates. They were no longer human in any traditional sense. Living quantum interfaces, biological computing systems that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Each bore the quantum-encoded signature that traced back to Ryder's original resistance protocol. A genetic memory, the philosophical inheritance. The occupation was over, but something far more profound had begun. Raska's computational remnants, fragmented, dissolved, transformed, became part of a new understanding. Not defeated, not conquered, integrated. The Prometheus laboratory was no longer a research facility. It was the birthpoint of a new form of existence, a living, breathing computational organism that represented the ultimate expression of human potential. We are becoming. Ryder's multidimensional presence resonated, something entirely new. The galactic community, those species that had watched the conflict, realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Not a war, not a conquest, an asterisk evolutionary event asterisk that redefined the very concept of existence. Humanity had not fought. Humanity had transformed. The smile that had begun during a public crucifixion continued to resonate through every quantum probability, every potential reality. A smile that said, "This is not an ending. This is a beginning." And the universe would never be the same.